Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're going to do a midweek update because now there's a ton going on in the world of cannabis. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learn something, all I ask is that you leave a thumbs up on the video, as it really helps out my channel, and I would really appreciate it. And then, of course, if you don't want to miss any future episodes and you actually want to get caught up and learn about this generational opportunity, make sure that you subscribe, and then I would recommend going back and watching the series Reality Check Cannabis in 2020, and then you can also go back and watch episodes of This Week in Cannabis from October leading up until now, because that pretty much covers all the potential catalysts we were expecting, and they've pretty much actually panned out that way. So it's very exciting. If you actually go back, you would get caught up to date on the industry. Now, without further ado, we're going to jump in and see that at least Mexico is sticking to their word and making progress in moving towards legalization. Mexico publishes medicinal cannabis regulation, creating a new market. And what this does, their health ministry on Tuesday published rules to regulate the use of medicinal cannabis, a major step in a broader reform to create the world's largest cannabis market in the Latin American country. Now, it's important to point out that this does include recreational use of cannabis and will create what would be the world's biggest national cannabis market in terms of population. And personally, I think that's great for licensed producers, for medical and for recreational, because if they don't have the infrastructure underway, they might be buying it from Canada, for example. So long term, that is a nice thing to see. And I do want to point out that Mexico's lawmakers are also in the final stages of legalizing recreational use of cannabis, which with the bill expected to pass the next period of Congress. Now, if you've watched the old video referring to Mexico, they did mention that they would resume in February, and they were hoping to sign the bill and pass it through then. It's already been voted through Senate and passed, so really the bill just needs to be signed, and this is just when they get back into action. So this is very exciting. Mexico said that they were going to do it. They're following through. After the UN has mentioned that, at least for medicinal purposes, we should deschedule cannabis, Mexico is following through on their fact that they're actually going to legalize it. So that's great. And then we can see from Cuomo, governor of New York, officially announcing we will legalize. The wording is important. It's not saying we could or I'm going to propose. We will legalize adult use cannabis, joining 15 states. This is huge, again, for jobs, tax revenue. Well, they already have medical legal in New York, so at least people have alternative to medicine, but also, most importantly, the minority communities affected most by the war on drugs. Now, just on the contrary, I do want to point out that medical cannabis bill is closer than ever to passing in South Carolina. This is huge. Now, this is interesting, but I just want to show the difference between the realities in these different states. For 7 years, medical cannabis legislation has been in front of lawmakers. For 7 years. Now, a state senator believes that this is the year where it could happen. But again, it's not saying he will, he's saying he believes this. But hey, if you're a state senator, it's your job. Try to make it happen. And he says already, because it's legal in 36 other states and 70% of Americans approve it, we should definitely consider creating an alternative medicine to opioids. Yes, you should. And this is big because the last 6 states to really make any sort of alteration, South Carolina is one of them. Then you've got Alabama, Tennessee, Kansas, Wyoming, and Idaho. And these states ultimately just, they're backwards. Their thinking is completely backwards about cannabis. They don't understand the plant. And this is a big step, especially when you consider that more people are dying of drug overdoses in South Carolina as pandemic limits treatment options. And it's just extremely sad that most people in this state probably don't realize that ending cannabis prohibition would give them an alternative medicine that's not going to make them addicted and not going to potentially kill them. And another way to treat pain naturally with a plant that humans have been using for millennia. Now, it's very sad because between January and May, fatal overdoses rose by survived and fatal. So overdoses in general rose from 47%, but as opposed to 540 last year, May 2019, there was 915 overdoses in May alone in 2020. How is this bill still sitting in the Senate of South Carolina? Why wouldn't you pass this so you can prevent more of your residents from dying? I seriously just don't get it, but I wanted to point that out. It's just the differences in states. New York, way ahead, progressive, a big city. South Carolina, not so much. You still have people dying because they don't have access to another medicine. So it's just so important to just get this propaganda and this old false narrative behind us so we can move forward and help people. Now, just want to point out again that APHA is releasing their earnings tomorrow, and I still have not sold any sort of shares I'm holding because I do think confidently that, again, if you look at Canopy Growth, their valuation, their market cap, is still $15 billion. And they've only got $1 billion left from the $5 billion Constellation Brands gave them. So, considering they're such a terribly performing company, management has been terrible with their money, And, they're still valued at $15 billion. I'm really hoping that APHA can show that they've been executing, especially considering growth that I'm going to show you quite soon. So the main reason I'm holding is just because, again, I'm holding long term. I'm not a trader, and I'm not trying to make any quick money. I really want this to be these investments to pan out long term. But the main thing I just want to point out as well is that because Canopy is valued at $15 billion and APHA is still $3.6 billion, and Canopy has lost the beverage game in Canada, they've lost the flower market in Canada, they've lost pretty much everything in Canada, while APHA has picked up SweetWater and then potentially merged with Tilray. I just don't see how, if the earnings are good tomorrow, that APHA doesn't have more room to climb just to kind of take some of the market share from Canopy. That's just my view, and again, this is not advice. I just want to share my opinion so that you can make better educated decisions on your own. That being said, this chart is not necessarily factual, so I need to point that out. Don't take this at face value. Take it with a grain of salt. This guy, Betting Bruiser, is an avid cannabis promoter on Twitter, and he's quite interesting. Sometimes he's right, sometimes he's wrong, but I just want to point out the fact that, just as someone that's been paying attention to this industry, I do think that they're close to being accurate, and I just want to show you how I think he could have possibly come to this conclusion. So Ontario did put out a quarterly review from July to September, covering Q2. So what they've done is they've released Q1 and Q2. So what I can imagine is what Betting Bruiser has done is gone down to the percentages of what company's selling what, and he's then just taken the growth from Q1 to Q2 and then extrapolated that from Q2 to Q3 and Q3 to Q4, and went through all the numbers and potentially divvied it up like this. Besides that, I don't know how he would have gotten this data. So again, I'm not saying that this is true, but I just want to say that this is more of like a guidance marker, because again, if you're trying to invest in Canada, at this point, again, there's only a few companies at the top, and you want to make sure you're getting a company that is growing their market share every single quarter, right? Every 3 months. So we've got APHA at number 1, big time, way ahead of the pack. Aurora number 2, but look, it seems like they're stagnating. They're not growing much. Redecan is a private company. You can't invest in them, unfortunately. Then we've got Canopy, and then we've got Pure Sun Farms, which is Village Farms International. So just to point out, though, again, this would only be Ontario cannabis sales data, and if we look from July to September, Ontario cannabis sales, or the OCS, made $30.5 million, but look how much more money retail stores made, right? When you open stores so that your citizens can access legal cannabis as opposed to going to the black market, they're going to do it as they're taking up market share. So just wanted to point that out, that, if these are accurate or not, it definitely, based on what I know, it seems relevant with what companies are in order based on what share they've been taking up. And now I just want to jump over to this, because usually it's on the 20th of every month, but we're January 13th and this is already out. October 2020 sales numbers have jumped $13 million overall in Canada, up $7 million in Ontario. And again, this only accounts from opening 20 stores. This does not yet account, or it might be the first month accounting for opening 20 to 40, but as of December 8th, Ontario is opening 80 stores a month. So I just wanted to point this out, that, the growth is happening and some companies are going to be picking up on this growth. And that being said, just to look at the big picture too, dried flower, vapes, and pre-rolls are the top selling area. So of course, any companies dominating in this, like APHA, they're going to benefit. So just wanted to point this out, that again, this is not face value, but it's a very interesting look at why Canada serves a lot less growth overall than what U.S. multi-state operators do, especially considering we've got 1/10 of the population of the U.S. So I know that was a lot of babbling, but I think he got the data from here and extracted it to be as accurate as possible, just to show hey, this is Canada. Few companies are growing, a lot aren't. So, all these companies that are below them are going to have to consolidate or try to partner up at some point. Many are going to go bankrupt and go out of business, because the reality is, you can't stay in business if you're losing money. And so just wanted to point all that out, and to then get to this point where Canaccord anticipates Q2 of 2021 revenue of $156 million tomorrow. Now, I noticed here they're expecting this, but there are no pro forma, well, at least SweetWater is not included, and APHA has just purchased SweetWater, so I would imagine that there's going to be an increase in their earnings just because of that. But again, when you look, and considering that last quarter they did $69.6 million in recreational and then $7.9 million in Canadian medical, and they're anticipating that it's just an increase up to 76.9 and 7.4, so 82 to 92. Again, looking at these numbers, I do really think that and remember, APHA's earnings tomorrow we're going to cover from September, October, November. I really do think APHA can see a little bit more growth than this, just based on what these numbers are seeing. And, November, there's a good chance that this trend continues. And then it doesn't even account for SweetWater. So that's why, again, I just want to round this off by saying, like, I am invested in Aphria. They're my largest holding. And just to give you folks perspective on what I'm doing, I am just going to hold through. And if I'm wrong, then hey, then I lose some value until the next run up in April. Again, just want to point out that you don't have to be a day trader and try to win every time. You just have to try and pick the right companies that long term are going to do well. Now, to jump back to the US though, after Cureleaf, they initially raised $275 million. Now it appears they've gotten that up to $317 million. Now, many other U.S. companies are following. Air Strategies are priced at $137 million, equity offering at $34.25. So they're raising $137 million at $34.25. So somewhere in the world, someone has, investors have accumulated this much money and are willing to give it to Air Strategies for a share price of $34.25. Now, again, though, this is not great for current shareholders and existing shareholders because it does dilute your share ownership. But again, if the company's management is good and they know how to use this money to make more money, long term, if you're not day trading and you're investing, you don't have to worry. As Planet 13 sells units to raise $7. So they're selling shares at $7 to raise $50 million. And then Terra Ascend as well raises $24 million. So I just want to point out again, just to break this down for new investors, what this means ultimately, though, is that Cureleaf is creating new shares, which again dilutes everyone who currently holds pieces of the pie. But as you know, if you watch the last video of This Week in Cannabis, Boris is explaining why he's doing this, and it seems like he was trying to get ahead of the game, and he has a game plan. So it's not like he's taking this money out to put it in his pocket. He really wants to make Cureleaf one of the largest companies in the US. But what this does is that, again, whether Cureleaf is trading above or below this, they are giving this many shares to a large chunk of investors for this price per share. And again, though, what this does is this adds $316 of debt to Cureleaf's balance sheet, and it also adds $360 million to their market cap. So ultimately, again, long term, this is not a big deal or nothing to be worried about. But I do want to point out that if you're invested in a company that is not raising money right now, that's also a great sign. You can be proud that you've invested in a company that is not raising more money because they're currently in a good spot and they have the ability, or at least they think have the ability to get out of debt and raise enough cash. Or create enough cash through cash flow, and through their operations that they don't need to raise money. So again, not that this is a bad thing, but it just goes to show that some companies really have big visions to get really, really large, while others don't necessarily need to, and they want to at least see organic growth before they go raise more money. It's just, what this does though is it shows that investors around the world are paying attention to the US and they want to get in on cannabis, because again, US institutions can't get in because these don't trade on they're not uplisted on US exchanges. The OTC markets is still seen as sketchy, strangely. So just to point out that it's not bad, but it's good that more attention is coming back towards this industry. Now, I just wanted to point out a few other things. I mainly cover MSOs and LPs. That's my strong suit, so I don't want to branch out too much, but Grow Generation is basically the Home Depot of cannabis, which is super cool. I wanted to point this out because what we're seeing is kind of a vertically integrated industry where we've got MSOs, which are growing, cultivating, and selling, but then we've now got a supportive industry where Grow Generation is supplying growers with the materials they need to do that. And they're a large chain of specialty hydroponic and organic garden centers with 39 locations across 11 states, and they reported 2020 revenue of $192 million, up 140%. So regardless, this points out that the demand for growers and for companies and growing materials is certainly going up in the US, because sales are up 63%, up 140 from the previous revenue, which is huge. So this is just great to see that, the industry is getting bigger. It is expanding itself, and I think that should remove any sort of worries that the progress we've made is going to be taken back. I don't think so. And again, ultimately, hey, I've got no control, but I just wanted to point that out because this is cool to see that, the industry is just expanding as we want it to. Now, this is big from Denver Post. I pulled this today. Very new. November cannabis sales push Colorado's industry to $2 billion annually for the first time. So think about that. In November, dispensaries sold 175.1 million, and recreational sales accounted for 140 million, medical about 34. But basically what this does is, although it's down 12% compared to the month prior, from January 2020 to November 2020, during a global pandemic and during one of the worst economic recessions we've seen in a long time, consumers purchased more than $2 billion in Colorado alone. And Colorado only has 5.7 million people. So if you've watched past videos and you've seen what Illinois has done, New York is just about to legalize. When you see what New York is going to do, keep in mind, folks, most of this revenue comes from recreational sales. Humans have always smoked. Once you create a legal market to fill the demand, They're just going to continue doing it and be even more proud of the fact that they can identify and know what they're smoking this time around. So that's awesome. And last but not least, North Dakota activists submit 2022 cannabis legalization ballot initiative. And just to jump back here, as you can see, North Dakota has medicinal cannabis legalized, but for recreational, it's decriminalized. And who benefits from a decriminalized market? The black market. So think about it. You're not a criminal if you have cannabis, but it's not a legal market. So, entrepreneurs can't set up shop and make money supplying a legal demand, which is crazy. So this, again, decriminalization versus legalization, big difference. That's why you want full-scale legalization. And it's great to see that at least North Dakota, they're pushing for it themselves, because ultimately, this is what everyone needs to remember. If your politicians, the people that you vote into power, aren't doing what you want them to do, it's our responsibility as individuals living in our country, or at least living where we live, to push for what we think is right and to push for what we think the people need. So I think this is great, because hopefully North Dakota can get what they want in 2022. Hopefully they can get it sooner, but ultimately it's just good to show folks that the momentum is building and the narrative is changing. So if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe if you don't want to miss any new videos, and I will see you on Sunday for the next episode of This Week in Cannabis. Have a great day, everybody.